friends, it's Gwen. Welcome back to my channel. I'm here to share some audiobook tips for beginners. These are the tips for the beginners, people who have never tried an audiobook, have tried and failed, or are a little bit intimidated by audiobooks. Tip number one is to not purchase an audiobook app like Audible or a service that you have to pay for. Use a free service such as Overdrive, which is an app that you can link with your local library card and your local library and borrow books for free on audiobook, or they offer like ebook as well. But for this, we're talking about audiobooks so that you can borrow an audiobook for free. Usually it's the same policy as your library. You get a certain amount of days to check it out and then it's automatically returned, and if there's not a hold, you could recheck it out if you need to. This isn't sponsored by Overdrive or anything like that. It's just the app that I like to use because it's free and I'm still a pretty new audiobook listener. I'm still a novice. Okay, guys. Another way that you can get ones for free is to actually go to your library and check out like the CDs that you can listen to like in your car or on your computer. You could borrow from a friend or something like that. But for starters, for beginners like us, just use the free methods that are available to you. Tip number two is to pick a book that you're either really excited about or a book that you're struggling to get through in another format that you still want to read, that you're not going to like DNF. So for example, if you're reading Stars Above by Marissa Meyer in physical format and you really do want to read the story, but you're just not able to get through it, try it on audiobook. Tip number three is to use headphones or earbuds to block out distractions. A lot of people have said that it's a great multitask tool, that they can like listen to it in their car and drive to work, or they're coloring and, listening to an audiobook, or they're doing some other task and listening to the audiobook. As a beginner, at least for myself, I'm not able to multitask that well. There are a few things that I can do while I'm listening to an audiobook, but it has to be like a mundane, like not important tasks such as driving, because when I read or listen, I really have to be focused on what I'm reading so I'm getting the entire story and I'm not missing bits and pieces. And before, that was my problem. I was trying to listen to audiobooks in the car and I was focusing on driving and I was like missing chunks of the story. So to block out distractions, headphones or earbuds. Tip number four is the one that I highly recommend above any of the other tips that I'm going to give you today. This is the tip that literally saved me as becoming a beginner in audiobooks. And it's one that really kind of has drawn me into checking out and listening to more audiobooks. And that is to read a physical copy of the book while you are listening to it. It just helps so much because your eyes are tracking it, you're listening to it. It's almost like you're reading the book, but you're not. You know what I'm saying? But reading a physical copy of the book and then listening to it, not reading it and then listening. I'm talking about anytime you're listening to it, you're physically reading the book along with the audiobook. And the last tip that I have for you is to bump up the speed. A lot of people do not take advantage of this feature, and audiobooks are typically read very slowly and methodically, and if you're reading along with it and trying to keep pace, it's so slow. But if you bump up the speed, in my case, I can listen to it on 2 times speed on the Overdrive app, but if I listen to it on the 2 times speed, that's about the rate at which I read naturally. So if you bump up the speed and you're reading the physical copy of the book along with it, it's like perfect. So you do have to play around with the speeds to see which is a speed that would fit your typical reading pace. But once you find that and you keep it on that speed, you can just fly through some audiobooks. So those are the end of the tips. Again, these are beginner tips. I'm sure as I get a little bit more accustomed to audiobooks that maybe I will be able to multitask more. Maybe I won't have to use headphones. Maybe I will be able to listen to an audiobook while I'm driving. But for the moment, I'm still a beginner and these are tips that are working for me, and I hope that if you try them out that they work for you as well. I've only listened to a handful of audiobooks. All of them except for one have been listened to on the Overdrive app. I do think I want to branch out and get Audible when it's a little bit more affordable to me, but for right now I'm just sticking with the Overdrive app. It is a little bit limited, but again, it's working for me right now. Let me know what you think of these tips. If you try them out, let me know. Again, it kind of all started with Stars Above by Marissa Meyer because I was reading it in physical format and I wasn't able to get through it. I listened to it on audiobook and it like completely changed my whole experience with that book. And what I found really helpful with audiobooks is when you're reading a trilogy or a series and you've read one or two books, or maybe just like the first book and you want to go into the second book, but you really don't remember that first book as well, pop in the audiobook for it, fly through it, and then you can jump into the second and maybe the third book. So I did marathon the Firebird series by Claudia Gray that way, and it was just great to be able to go back to the first book and like read the whole series together thanks to the audiobooks. If it wasn't for the audiobooks, I would have never gotten through the Screwtape Letters by C.S. Lewis or Library of Souls by Ransom Riggs. I just absolutely adored reading Under Rose-Tainted Skies on audiobook, and I'm currently, I say currently because I'm really not currently, but I am rereading Truth Witch so I can go into Wind Witch, and I will be doing that by audiobook as well. So again, let me know if these tips work. Let me know what some of your favorite audiobooks are. Maybe once I get a little bit more audiobooks under my belt, I'll be able to do some recommendations for you. But that's all I have for today. Thank you for joining me. I hope you've enjoyed, and I'll see you again in my next video. Bye!